I'm not here to waste your time. Let's get into it. Number 1. Hydrothermal Field, Lost City. In December 2000, Dr. Donna Blackman and Dr. Deborah Kelly were mapping the Mid-Atlantic Ridge when their submersible came across a field of massive towers, rising 60 meters from the seafloor like a ghostly city. 60 meters? That's bigger than my house. The towers were pure white and made of calcium carbonate, so basically chalk. They looked like giant skyscrapers stacked on the ocean floor. Typically, cities like this are near heat sources, but this one was different. See, before the discovery, scientists had only seen vents near volcanoes. Hot magma heats water from underneath, which then shoots it upward, causing vents to form. So how was this city even created? Scientists think the answer lies underground. The seawater seeped down through the cracks in the rock, and when it reached the mantle below, a chemical reaction produced heat via hydrogen gas and methane. Ta-da! And there you have your underwater city. From some of the towers, warm, clear fluid cascaded down the side like waterfalls, shimmering like an ancient civilization. What's interesting is that as long as seawater keeps seeping into the rock below and the chemical reaction keeps happening, these towers could keep venting forever. Kind of like my wife at home. Lost City has been active for at least 100,000 years, and it could keep going for 1,000,000 more. Number 2, Macropina microstoma, the barrel eye fish. Picture this. It's the year 2004, and deep-sea scientists on the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, MBARI, spotted a fish at a depth of 2,000 feet that looked like its head was made of glass? Yes, transparent like a fishbowl. Ironic. And inside that dome were 2 glowing green orbs that looked like miniature light bulbs staring upward into the darkness. When researchers Bruce Robinson and Kim Reisenbichler saw the footage from their underwater drone, they couldn't believe it, because at that very moment, they recognized it as the fish that had been discovered in 1939, but that no one had ever seen alive. Previous specimens brought up from the ocean were always damaged with cloudy heads. Because of that, the transparent head was invisible, and no one knew what it really looked like. And here's where it gets even stranger. Those green eyes can actually rotate. The fish normally stares straight up, scanning the darkness above for prey. But when something moves past, it can swivel those glowing orbs forward to track it. Okay, great. But then, why the transparent dome? Well, it simply protects the fish's eyes as it hunts near stinging jellyfish tentacles, stealing their trapped prey without getting stung. Everything about this creature is perfectly designed for a life in total darkness. When MBARI released the images in 2008, the world was amazed. But this discovery only proved one thing. We barely know our own planet. If only we had those barrel eyes. Am I right? Anyone? Number 3, cold seeps, chemosynthetic ecosystems. Did you know there's an underwater garden with living creatures older than most humans? In 1983, oceanographer Charles Paul was on a routine dive in the Gulf of Mexico. Everything seemed normal nearly 2 miles down, but when his view shifted from the control system to outside his submersible's window, he actually saw the garden in blue light, revealing bright white tubes and deep red tips. It wasn't a garden of plants like we typically know it. They were giant clams, massive tube worms up to 1 meter long, and mussel beds carpeting the floor. However, Paul realized these creatures weren't near hot vents like scientists had seen before. No, the water around them was so cold that nothing should survive there. But here's the catch. Something was seeping up from the seafloor, called methane and hydrogen sulfide, which are actually toxic chemicals. And yet, the creatures ate it? Paul was amazed. How could these creatures eat toxic chemicals and survive? Here's how it works. The giant worms farm bacteria inside their bodies. The bacteria eat the toxic gases from below and create energy. The worms then feed on this bacteria. And because the bacteria constantly multiply through binary fusion, the worms never run out of food. It's an ecosystem trapped inside of themselves. So how do they live for so long? In the deep ocean, everything happens in slow motion. Because the water's near freezing, their metabolism slows down to a crawl. They grow at a snail's pace, barely aging as the decades pass. Time dilation for sea vegetables. The discovery also brought something new to light because it proved that life doesn't need the sun to survive. If the sun stopped burning tomorrow, these creatures wouldn't even notice. Since then, more of those gardens have been found worldwide, off California, Japan, the Black Sea, and Africa. Everywhere we look, we see them. Each one is a thriving oasis in the deep. Number 4, Paleodictyon, hexagonal burrow systems. Ever wondered if we're alone in the universe? Of course you have. Well, in 1976, while exploring the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, geologist Peter Rona discovered thousands of near-perfect hexagons. These patterns, known as Polydictyon nodosum, are so symmetrical that they look almost engineered. Rona's first thought? The work of aliens. For a long time, scientists only knew these hexagons from fossils and rocks dating back millions of years. Seeing them again on the seafloor was a massive discovery. They thought this was a local anomaly, but they were wrong. These identical hexagons have been found in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Another miracle is their survival. The seafloor is a place of violent forces, tectonic plates shifting, continents drifting, and unimaginable pressure. Normally, any structure in the ground should be crushed or torn apart over the years, but not these ones. After all these millions of years, they're still sitting with perfect geometry. Since the discovery, hundreds of samples and scanners have been made. They checked every inch for DNA, worms, or hidden organisms. The results are always the same. 0 signs of life. Well, that kind of life. What they did find, however, is a masterpiece of engineering. Each hexagon is basically a gateway to a highly complex underground city, a connected network of vertical shafts and horizontal passages. And what about the size? Well, each individual hexagon is only about 2 inches wide, and the tunnels themselves are as thin as a pencil. Yet, they are built with a precision that humans could only achieve with modern high-tech tools. Scientists believe these tunnels are actually a sophisticated bacteria farm. The hexagons are designed to trap deep-sea currents, funneling fresh water and nutrients into the shafts to support bacterial growth. Okay, so technically it's life, and basically they're bacteria farms and tunnels, but realistically, who uses them? And wait, who's the farmer? Number 5, brine pools, lakes in the ocean. You probably know SpongeBob SquarePants and those famous underwater beaches at the Goo Lagoon. You might have thought they were pure fiction, but what if I told you they're actually based on reality? See, in 1983, scientists diving with the submersible Alvin discovered something on the ocean floor nearly 5,000 feet below the surface that actually looked like a real lake. It sat there in the darkness, a pool of even darker, flickering liquid with waves rippling across its surface. So they decided to see if they could land on it. I know, brave. The brine was so thick and salty that the submersible could rest on it without sinking. Around the edges, strange creatures like mussels and tube worms had somehow learned to survive there. But the moment anything tried to swim into the pool itself, it died. Instantly. Why? Well, the brine was 3 to 5 times saltier than the normal seawater, and because of that, it's completely void of oxygen. In addition, a large amount of hydrogen sulfide, a poisonous gas, flows in there. Experts explain that these toxic pools form when salt from deep underground leaks upward through cracks in the seafloor. At the edges, tiny bacteria somehow survive the poison, and those strange creatures like tube worms, they feed on these bacteria to stay alive. The Circle of Life, Creepy Ocean Edition. A few years later, another team of scientists visited a different pool called Hot Tub of Despair. This time, they didn't just try to float on the lake. No, they sent a probe down into the unknown. It actually descended 62 feet into one pool and never found the bottom. So in reality, nobody knows how deep some of these lakes go. Number 6, methanhydrat, burning ice. On the ocean floor, buried kilometers below the surface, lies something that appears to be ordinary ice. But if you bring it to the surface and set it on fire, it will burn. Fire and ice existing together? Well, let's get scientific for a second before HBO shows up and tries to ruin this as they did Game of Thrones. We call it methane hydrate, and it forms where water and methane, the same gas that cows fart out, meet under extreme pressure and temperature. See, methane comes from the decomposition of organic matter deep underground. Dead stuff that used to be alive stuff. As this stuff rises, it crystallizes with water into ice. Or, in simpler terms, it becomes a cage of ice holding highly flammable gas. Oh, right, there's one more bizarre thing. Tiny worms actually live on this burning ice, burrowing into it and eating bacteria. Even mussels anchor themselves to it. Sounds like fun so far, right? Ocean warming melts these hydrate deposits. The released methane could catastrophically accelerate climate change. No need to worry at all. Most scientists believe the methane release happens slowly, and bacteria will filter out most of it. And the most interesting fact? It's a potential gold mine. Some countries even view this frozen fire as the fuel of the future, with enough energy to power our planet for centuries. Nuclear fusion or burning bacteria ice? See, it's packed with energy. In fact, one bucket of this ice holds enough gas to fill nearly 160 buckets of normal air. Think of it like this. Imagine taking a whole room full of gas and squeezing it down until it fits into a single lunchbox. That's the level of compression we're talking about inside the ice block. That means you could power your entire house for weeks with just a few blocks. Or you could fuel a car to drive across the country, assuming your car runs on natural gas. Unfortunately, today, it's still very expensive because it's difficult to transport out of the ocean without causing underwater landslides. But once we master the process, the ice could eventually be much cheaper than the gas we use today, since there's simply so much energy on the bottom of the ocean. Hopefully the American government won't find out, or they'll kidnap that in a secret operation next. Number 7, Magna Pina, the big fin squid. In 2007, a Shell oil rig drone in the Gulf of Mexico began capturing footage that seemed impossible. Nearly 2 miles below the surface, in absolute darkness, a creature floated mysteriously in front of the drone's light. The creature had a reddish-brown body with 8 arms and 2 tentacles, all stretching over 20 feet and bent at 90-degree angles. Above these long limbs were large heart-shaped fins on the head, and they moved slowly, keeping it hovering in the water. It was a Magna Pina, and this was the most popular footage showing the creature fully recognizable. But below the oil rig wasn't the first encounter. Nope, that was in the late 1980s when deep-sea submersibles captured fleeting video glimpses of the squid. Back then, scientists had no idea what it was. In fact, the story goes way back to 1883, when the first damaged remains of the Magna Pina were found. But no one could identify what these remains were. It wasn't until 115 years later, in 1998, when Dr. Mike Vecchione gave it a name, Magna Pina, or the big fin squid. But with only fragments to study, the mystery only grew. What did this creature look like when alive and healthy? How large did it become? See, since the first discovery, only about a dozen confirmed sightings have ever been recorded worldwide. Scientists still theorize about its unique body. Some say it uses those long arms like fishing lines, drifting in the dark and trapping small creatures. Others believe the angles might prevent the arms from dangling while moving through the water. And why does the Magna Pina grow so large? To put it in perspective, this creature can reach lengths of up to 26 feet, which is nearly as long as a standard American school bus. There are so many mysteries, but here's the problem. No Magna Pina has ever been captured. Everything we know comes from just a few videos. So let's check back in another 100 years. Number 8, Zemchung, Submarine Canyon. For centuries, the Grand Canyon was considered Earth's most spectacular geological wonder, a massive chasm carved into the landscape. But here's the thing, it isn't even the biggest canyon on our planet. In the 1970s, as our technology improved and underwater cameras and sensors became much sharper, researchers mapping the ocean floor made a startling discovery. Beneath the waves of the Bering Sea, they were forced to ask, did we just find another canyon? Well, yes! They called it the Zemchug Canyon, and when they compared its dimensions to those of the Grand Canyon, they realized it was much larger. The Grand Canyon is about a mile deep and 18 miles wide. Zemchung, it's over 1.6 miles deep and 62 miles wide. That's over 60% deeper and significantly wider. If you could drain the ocean and stand at the bottom of Zemchug, the walls around you would be so high that the Grand Canyon could fit entirely inside, with plenty of room to spare. It's so huge that even satellites in space can track the location by spotting the massive clouds of green life created on the ocean surface, not by literally seeing it from space. Now, what are these green clouds, you're wondering? It's actually quite simple. See, Zemchug works like a giant vacuum. When deep ocean currents hit its steep walls, they act as a ramp, sucking up water from the abyss and pushing it to the surface. This deep water is packed with vitamins and minerals that have been settling on the floor for years. It's like an underwater elevator bringing a fresh delivery of food to the top, turning the canyon into a massive buffet for whales and seals. The clouds are just another side effect of that process. And that's just one canyon of many. Others are off the coasts of California, Portugal, West Africa, and elsewhere. Massive underwater valleys that dwarf any canyon on land. Boy, we sure do love the word canyon, don't we? I promise I won't say it again. Canyon. Number 9, Stygiomedusa, the giant phantom jelly. After a deep-sea mission in 1899, scientists found the first ever specimen of a creature so rare that over 100 years would pass before anyone saw it alive again. They called it Stygiomedusa gigante. And if that name seems a bit ridiculous, because it is, how about the giant phantom jelly? For decades after its discovery, though, it was just a name, leaving researchers with dozens of puzzles to solve. But finally, in the 1980s, as deep-sea submersibles began exploring the abyss for longer and deeper, they finally caught the first-ever glimpse of the phantom on camera in the Pacific Ocean. The scientists described the sighting as breathtaking, and it was. The jelly's bell reached over 3 feet across, colored deep red or even brown. Hanging from the bell were 4 massive arms that stretched 30 feet or more, drifting as ghostly curtains through the water. Unfortunately, this sighting in the 1980s was rare, because over the past 100 years, only about 120 sightings were documented worldwide across every deep-sea mission. But these sightings still taught scientists a few things. In the deep, the arms can drift weightlessly due to water support. If you could somehow bring this creature to the surface, the arms would lose their shape instantly and collapse under the pressure of its own body weight. Basically, a giant pile of jelly that's impossible to pick up, hence the name jellyfish. Also, this monster isn't always alone. Sometimes it was seen with a tiny fish called Thalassalabathia pelagica that actually lives inside or right alongside the jellyfish. It uses the giant's massive, stinging-free arms as a fortress, hiding from predators that wouldn't dare get close to the phantom. Scientists believe it's a top predator, but they never actually watched one eat. You might wonder, if it doesn't sting, how is it a top predator? Well, it doesn't need poison when it has power. The arms act like massive, sticky curtains. It literally envelops its prey, wrapping them in a shroud of thick tissue before pulling them towards its mouth. A lot of questions still need to be answered about this creature. Well, other than the fact that it's a phantom of my nightmares. Number 10, the Hadal Zone, ocean's deepest trenches. On January 23, 1960, 2 men descended into a place so deep and so hostile that fewer humans have been there than have walked on the moon. The Swiss oceanographer Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy officer Don Walsh piloted a small submersible called the Trieste nearly 7 miles straight down into Challenger Deep, the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The pressure was over 1,000 times that of the surface. Yes, that's the equivalent of having 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of the sub. And if even a tiny crack had formed in the hull, the water would have shot inside with the force of a bullet, crushing the boat and everyone inside instantly. Luckily, everything went smoothly, and they actually saw something. Life. A flatfish drifted past their window. Yes, at the deepest point in the entire ocean. At least, that's what they thought for the first 50 years after the discovery. Sorry to disappoint you. Today, experts know that no fish can survive that deep in the ocean. And the fish they saw was, in reality, a sea cucumber. Yep. Anyways, for decades after that discovery, the Hadal Zone, which is the scientific term for trenches deeper than 3.7 miles, remained largely unexplored. Yes, we mapped the moon more thoroughly than we mapped our own ocean floor. Very weird, if you ask me. Although, in 2019, another serious effort for discovery began. Victor Vescavo, a retired U.S. Navy officer and explorer, and his team dove multiple times to Challenger Deep and other trenches, discovering life forms never seen before, like amphipods, microbes, and xenoviaphores, which are all some sort of living organisms. But here's the sad reality. At the bottom of the deepest ocean on Earth, they found plastic bags. Yes, humanity's garbage somehow made it all the way down there. And because there's no sunlight to break plastic down through photodegradation, that bag will likely stay there for thousands of years. So, dispose of your trash properly, kids. What's creepier than all of this is that the Hadal Zone remains 95% unexplored. We don't know what else is down there. What creatures might be hiding in trenches we haven't visited yet? Well, the only answer I have is to please subscribe for more deep sea content.